Thank you.
Okay.
Right.
I will call the meeting of the November 1st, 2007 Shade Tree Commission to order. And we have a fairly brief agenda tonight. And let's see, the first things are tree permit and right-of-way issues. And there are actually more tree permits here than appear. But we have looked at 14 Tulane, where a resident there has asked for a removal of a pretty dead crabapple. I stacked up a pile of dead limbs over by the side of it. So she's right, it was dropping limbs. And to have a red maple or an oak planted there. And so we've, this is a site that others may not have had a chance to look at, but I think Ron and Ann have. The possibility of a swamp white oak is something that Ann suggested in the site. It's close to her office.
This is a tree that the owner has offered to plant.
No, she would prefer
Okay.
that we do it. And we do have money in the budget, which is a nice thing. We have a dozen trees that we're going to plant, and we're under the amount of money that we encumbered still. So we can afford to do one more tree at least. And
Are you looking for more sites? One more site?
if it's possible. Yeah, this one is a good one. But we do have a little bit more money, actually.
Or even beyond planting.
Even beyond planting that one. So if there is another site.
Okay.
Sure, we could find something.
Don't you
There's
think?
another one on Tulane, actually. There's a really
That's-
nice site that's pretty open on the same, closer to East State Street, that actually had a tree and it must have died.
Okay.
But it was just, that's off the top of my head. There's probably other sites too.
Yeah, there are a couple of dead trees in that. This is the creek area that runs down from Cable Lane, and there's a creek or a run that divides Tulane into two lanes. And so it's on that creek side. Yeah.
Is this one that the city's going to be able to remove?
Ron, you looked at that crabapple, didn't you?
I think we can.
Yeah. It's thank you. Okay. And there is another request, tree permit request for a removal, and that is behind, actually right out behind this building, and also behind the Athens News building. It's from people in the Athens News building who are requesting to remove a tree. There's a box elder and another small tree growing close together.
Alanthus and Tree of Heaven.
Alanthus and Tree of Heaven. Yeah.
I mean, or, yeah.
Alanthus is the Tree of Heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Never mind.
I vote to remove it.
That's just prejudice about Alanthus.
Sorry.
But it is a male, and it's surrounded by concrete.
Okay, so it is a tough site, all right.
Well, and it's a unique site, but,
If it's the only thing that'll grow there, I'm for it, but.
well, it's kind of in a, I don't know, the grade is kind of awkward there too. I think,
Yeah.
I don't know what's transpired since I looked at it, so.
Not much. Ron, did you get a chance to look at that behind there? It is a fairly healthy little bouquet of a bad tree and and the Tree of Athens, which is the box elder.
Yeah.
So, Anne, when you assessed it, you thought that that was something worth keeping, but perhaps pruning?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was structurally sound, and that's, of course, the biggest issue. And you're right. I mean, it's considered an undesirable species, but removing the tree is going to open that site up to all kinds of issues because it's kind of an old property line, I think, and the grade is different above the tree versus below it.
It'll be hard to get anything else to grow.
Yeah,
there.
and it'll be hard to even park. I mean, I think we should wait until they have a plan to maybe redo that parking area if they were going to maybe I don't know what you guys thought, but that was my thought. If they were going to do some improvements to the parking lot, that would be an opportunity to remove the tree and maybe do some decorative plantings, because they lose a lot of shade too. I mean, there's a nice 25-foot spread on it.
Oh,
So
well,
it sounds logical.
we're in the shade business, right?
Yeah.
It's doing its job.
And it's shading pavement, isn't it?
It is shading some kind of rough pavement, but
And an area where there's fumes,
Yes.
the air that the tree is taking care of to a certain extent, so. Cleaning the air, providing shade.
Yeah.
So just prune the box elder.
Yeah, yeah, if that, I told, my friend works in one of has a window looking on it, and I told him next week I would go maybe visit him and look at it from the top.
Oh, good,
Because I
yeah.
think they were kind of seeing it from the top and
Yeah.
concerned maybe about some secondary wires and.
Oh,
This is
okay.
kind of a plan.
If that's an
of-
issue, I think we could probably, maybe suggest it, because that would be something either AEP would do for them or that they would work with AEP on, so.
Yeah,
it's kind of-
but those aren't high-tension lines. Those are just
No.
lines feeding a building.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, so they're insulated, so there's not the threat of anybody getting electrocuted if the tree touches them or anything like that, so.
Okay, so the concern that the owner had about the power lines is really moved because of the insulated
Probably,
lines.
probably.
Yeah,
And I think there is often that confusion. They see all lines as being a hazard with trees rather than knowing exactly which ones it's a problem.
yeah, I'll pass that maybe over to David and then over to Ron to have a look too. Okay, so then we're going to recommend probably just pruning of the box, of the trees.
If that's all right.
That's it.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Ron. Ron, do you wanna-
I might enough.
Okay. Let's see, there was another, let's see, well, actually, those are the only two serious tree permits. There was another one that was for trees not on the right-of-way, and so we don't have to deal with that. We have the order into Five Springs Farm. This is the 12 trees that are going to be planted. I think everybody's maybe seen this in their email. And they are largely residential. There are 3 hackberries going in at the south border of the parking lot at West Arts. And that's the only
Oh, nice.
non-residential
Nice.
area. That's well out of the area where they're doing ramps for handicapped entry, I think. That's all up against the building, so these are safely out of that way. And we have hackberries ordered in advance to make sure we could get them. And this is a very tough tree for a really tough site.
Yeah.
So that'll be an interesting one too for the kids. There's one site there, Ron, where we asked, that's a potential planting site in about a year or so, maybe if transplant doesn't make it, but it's a right-of-way request at 83 Maplewood to make sure that the flag where a tree might be planted is indeed in the right-of-way. And that was in an email communication earlier. Are there any comments on the nursery order that you've... This is a nursery order that totals
$28.50.
$28.50, and we have about $4,000 some dollars in our budget, so we can plant some more trees. And it would behoove us to get this information to the nursery quickly if we have sites. It does mean in residential areas letting people know and making sure that they want something like that if it turns out to be virtually in what they think is their yard, but is right away. In all the cases that we have here, everybody's been contacted and they're enthusiastic and virtually adopting the trees.
Right.
And that's
what we
That's
need.
important, actually.
And 2 residents.
So if anybody's watching, they have to call tomorrow.
Yes.
Watching,
To the mayor's
prepare to water.
Yeah, you have to commit to water and mulch. Wow. Yeah.
Job security.
We might provide, when we put plant trees, we might provide people with information about watering.
Yes.
Tell them about the alligator bags, or even the technique of putting a bucket that has the holes in the bottom, or
Yeah, the
So that-
5-gallon plastic bucket so that it drips slowly. Yeah, the poor man's gator bag.
I wonder if there's a handout from,
We can just make one.
Extension.
We can use you've got a graphic on mulching, don't you?
Yeah, I think I probably have a flyer that
Okay,
I think we
great.
did years ago for the city of Athens. So
Oh.
on Monday I'll look through the computer and send you guys some stuff. But I'm sure we don't have to reinvent the wheel on that. I'm sure
No,
there's
just
Great.
use
something
what we've got.
available, or even we could rob something off the
I
internet.
have copies of the brochure that you did for the street department.
Oh,
That would be good.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we could give
Yeah, refresh
each of the
my-
adopters.
yeah, sort
adopter.
of like well,
Like if there was one with like your baby.
Exactly,
baby
right,
tree.
right here. Just sort of make it A mini event,
Yeah.
rather than just, now you've got a tree and so long.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah, and in some cases, some people are taking on the responsibility for 2 trees, a neighbor's tree too. Maybe even some people at this table for all. Well, okay, the next item is a maintenance issue. And maybe I could take advantage of Ron Lucas at this point, our city arborist. Ron was instrumental in coordinating with Susan Calhoun of Ohio University Grounds Department. Susan Calhoun came to the Tree Commission with some concerns about a half a dozen or more trees that were in pedestrian areas close to campus where there was a lot of pedestrian traffic, and there are city trees. And then there were even some questions about a couple of trees, which is whose they were, because they were in ambiguous situations. So we have, do you have a maintenance report that you'd like to comment on?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'll be just reiterating what she said about our tree review with some of the things that Susan Calhoun wanted us to look at. We came up with a number of trees that are in the city right away, and also a plan to trim some trees that are going to be taken care of by Susan. So those are ones that are in predominantly university proper, such as College Street, and some on the corner of Court Street and Park Place. The ones that we decided to take an action on were at West Mulberry by the new Baker Center. There's a silver maple. It needs to be removed. It's really healthy, but it's got a crack in it, and it's leaning over a few parking spaces, and there's concern that it could fall. University Terrace by the what is it, the Episcopal Church?
Yes,
Yeah.
Church of the Good Shepherd.
There's 2 sugar maples. There's a small one that the city can remove, and the larger one can be trimmed, and the city can take care of that. And also Dairy Lane, South Park Drive, 2 sugar maples at their right-of-way check. They're both in the city right-of-way, and they both can be removed. So we'll have to contract those ones out.
And what's wrong with them?
They're
Old?
they're old, and they got some kind of
It's not a fungus?
yeah, some kind of fungus.
Diseased?
Yeah.
They're just really, they're suffering, I think, from living that close to all that activity and concrete and
Oh.
sidewalks. You know, they're kind of got that kind of stunted appearance.
Asphalt bike path right over the roots of one.
That's particularly bad for sugar maples.
Yeah, they've got the like dieback in the top, and
Yeah, they're on their way out.
Anne came with us. We did this in 2 stages. Susan took me around to see the sites where the trees were in question, and then Ron and Anne and I went out. Yes, it was only yesterday, and looked at the trees again. And the cracked one hadn't really been noticed on the first time around. When Susan and I saw it, there was a whole lot more vegetation around it. You couldn't get it close. 1 week and a half time, you could get in there a little easier. So this is, we've been asking for assistance on sites where there is essentially shared responsibility for the condition of a tree or issues about pedestrian traffic in particular. And the university does have crew that can do the pruning of some things fairly quickly and of larger trees. So this is this will move action on trees in those kinds of traffic areas faster, pruning.
Great.
And it was very effective communication, I thought, between everyone involved in getting the sites looked at and coming up with a plan to take care of it. So kudos.
Yeah, we finally did something right. Thank you, Ron. Do you have other tree maintenance things that you'd like to report on before you
If
sit
you'd
down?
like for me to go over some of the list, I can.
If you wish,
It won't
this is a
take long.
chance.
I've created a spreadsheet of some of the tree removals and trimmings that we've been doing over the past 6 months. And starting soon, meaning probably in the next week or so, we're going to take on a bunch of the in-house stuff that we can do. And I collaborated all the emails that I've seen from tree commission members and some city staff, and just put them in all one place. And I won't go over the trimmings much, but the removals are 37 South May. There's a silver maple that we can do in-house. 67 Columbus Road, the ash. I haven't been up there this week, but I did notice the last I saw it did have a blue mark on it from AEP to remove it. Lloyd by East Elementary, there's a dead tree. We can remove that. Maplewood and Watt tree removal, that's getting contracted out. 9 North Congress, a dead Zelkova. We can do that. 10 Cost, silver maple. That's going to be that's a big tree.
Yeah, that's contracted to out, isn't it?
Yes. And 22 South May and Bradford Pear needs trimmed or removed. I think we'll trim on it a little bit and keep an eye on it.
Okay.
2 Valley View, there's a couple tree removals on Valley View. It's a small street right off of Fort, threatening a home possibly. 2 trees. Moeller and Mulligan, there's an ash tree. It fell down in the storm event a couple weeks ago. We removed a lot of it that was fallen, but there's one piece left, and it's probably going to fall. So we're going to have to probably contract that one out. 14 Tulane, dying crabapple we spoke of, and that's it as far as the removals are concerned. But we're going to try to get some of them contracted out this year and take care of a lot of them on here. The trimming portion, there's about 20 or so trees, sites in here that we need to do some trimming on. But we can take care of that as we go throughout the rest of the year.
And you'll circulate that spreadsheet?
Yes, I can.
By email for us?
And I'll
That would
keep
be
it
good.
updated so that you know where we're at.
Okay. There was a question somebody emailed me about on Roosevelt Drive. The city has a cell tower, a cell phone tower.
Yeah.
And
It's
there's
up
some.
Highland Park.
Okay.
Yeah, just
And
above
there are there trees that might?
Yeah, I met with the folks that are doing that work, and basically they're going down over the hill from Roosevelt to Highland Reservoir, and there's just some tree trimming that needs to be done.
Yeah, but they need to be watched because when AEP have been trimming in that area, they've just dumped all the brush on the hillside. And
Okay.
It leaves a bit of a mess there.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we need to
Could you-
decide where if they are to leave the brush behind, you need to decide where it's best for them to leave it.
Okay. So far, they've been in good communication with us in terms of being on site, so hopefully that'll continue.
Yeah, yeah, they, well, pleased to shepherd that. On the North Lancaster tree that's by the church or the parsonage, that's, the blue blaze is an AEP prune mark. And so they, but AEP's pruning is part of the problem with that tree being in terminal decline. So that's the one we're hoping, that is one that AEP
Yeah.
is going to take out, is it?
Yes, I spoke with Steve Stanley and Don Stemple from AEP, and they said that they would remove the tree.
Okay, good. Sorry, thanks, I didn't understand those. Okay, very good. And while we've got you there, we also have, I think we've really got you, doing the Tree City USA application, as I understand. The one you did last year was really, really an improvement over what we had done sometimes.
I have the information, both hard copy and from Ann via email, and I will get that done.
Okay,
I'll
if
probably
you
need to tackle some of the old minutes to get a feel for all the trees that we've done work on.
Somebody reads them, see? Yeah,
But
okay.
yeah,
If you have come upon missing sections of minutes, contact us because we have them on our computers.
Okay.
Probably if they're not in the files.
Okay.
You might want to, here's your chance to delegate back. It is required to do an annual report, you know.
The work summary, yes.
Yeah, and so, you know, you guys could bat that one around. It doesn't have to be long, but just to kind of outline, you guys have
Yeah.
done a lot this year.
Right.
And I'm sure they'd love to.
Traditionally, the chair has done part of that, so I will write and send to you
Okay.
work summary information from our perspective.
That sounds good.
All right. Thank you very much, Ron.
You're welcome.
Anybody have any questions for Ron? No? Okay. I think.
Do you want any of this in the minutes, or how we, in terms of detail? I mean,
How detailed need it be? Probably. I don't think we need to have this much detail in the minutes.
Okay. I'll just note that he's given the reports then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Let's see, the next item is the landscape ordinance issues, and we, Steve alerted us to this, and many of us have gone to Bennigan's to look at their
Look and laugh.
planters.
Hi.
Hey,
Hello.
Mark,
Welcome.
hello.
We have a chair for you.
I missed hear Susan's name being praised.
Yes.
Susan Calhoun, she's being praised for the cooperation between the city and the university.
About the tree on,
All the trees. She's been helping Ron a lot with.
Yeah, especially the
identifying
cost one,
trees.
bless her.
yeah, you know, I had previously taken Dave Hamill down there and got his agreement to split the cost on that. And so everybody was in agreement.
Yeah, it's led to even more cooperation. It's wonderful.
Good.
Well, Steve has some information for us, I believe, on Bennigan's, perhaps. Is that?
Yes. My name's Steve Pearson, the Director of Code Enforcement for the City of Athens, Ohio. And I guess at these meetings, I don't have to be sworn in, but I took an oath a long time ago.
Just don't swear, that's all we ask.
At the last meeting of the Tree Commission, I provided you with 3 letters sent by different departments of the city related to the Bennigan site that had to do with sediment erosion control, stormwater control, zoning, landscaping, and that letter was issued September 18th. I noticed that they have put up some sediment and erosion control fencing to keep the water from running off the parking lot, and seeded and strawed in the bank, so hopefully that grass will take. But they've not done any of the other things that were requested in the letter. I've not yet received a plan for the new striping on the parking lot, or any indication of parking blocks, because that could help in some respect to keep that water from running down the face of the elevated site. And I drove by the other day and I mentioned to Al, you might want to stop by and look. I couldn't tell exactly what was going on there in the parking lot. They had taken some landscape timbers and built little small planter boxes and put a couple trees in them. So those are nowhere near the required square
Does anyone know if they
footages.
have penetrated the asphalt, or have they just?
Oh,
put them
no,
on
they're
top?
just sitting
They're
on
just
top of
sitting
the
on top of
asphalt, aren't they?
Yeah, it may be that, they pinned that bottom row of landscape timbers down, but it's nowhere near what's required. And there, information is still lacking from the 4 items that I noted in that letter from September 18th. So what'll be going out next to RSB Enterprises, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, will be an order to comply. Gives them an additional 15 days to complete the work or give a reason why. If it's not completed in that amount of time, then all this information gets forwarded to the law director's office. So, and then they decide how to proceed from there.
What was the name of the owner you're going to send this to again?
And RSB Enterprises,
It's,
P.O. Box
this
3,
place.
Oh, okay.
Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
I've got RBU Enterprises.
It's changed hands
Okay.
3 or 4 times.
Okay, so it's now RSB Enterprises.
There's always an R at the beginning. I'm not sure who the other ones were. It's probably kind of like a construction company I used to have called FFB Enterprises. Yeah, if you remember from Mad Magazine, there were the Furry Freak Brothers. And that's what,
Fabulous.
we didn't want people to know that because we looked like a legitimate construction company. Very successful. And nobody even knew what we were doing for sure. So anyway, that's some information on Bennington's, and in order to comply, I'll have to go out.
Very good.
On
And
that
there's
one.
not been a sign of a revised plan from Taco Bell with property lines and information?
Well, I'll tell you what may have happened on that, and it may not be the landscaper's fault entirely. At the last meeting, you'd asked me to do a little bit of clerical work and get some information to Jack Alvis about what was considered at the last meeting. Jack and I talked about it. I gave him all the information, and then you actually have a letter there that I wrote today, just to memorialize our conversation. I may not have done a letter in writing
Okay.
back to the Taco Bell landscaper, so I'll have to check and see if I did, what the problem might be, and if that letter hasn't been sent, I'll need to do that in writing. So it may be my fault
Okay.
that nothing's come back yet on that
Yeah.
one.
Now, the critical thing was property lines, particularly so that we can know
Exactly.
where those screening evergreens would go between the business and the apartments.
Right, you and I had communicated back and forth, and I remember the landscaper had the letter. So you and I had talked back and forth about how extensive the drawing had to be.
Yeah.
So that may be my fault. I will follow up on that
Okay.
one.
Thank you very much.
A couple things, just to kind of add to the question that you had about the communications tower up at Highland Park.
Yeah.
A couple months ago, City Council approved an amount of money for the city to contract with Newcomb Communications for a new, essentially an internal communication system for the city, which would include internet, radio communications, wireless internet, and telephone. So that was a project approved by council several months ago. There are some additional, I know there's at least one other tower installation. It's behind the code enforcement office, but it's right in the middle of a big piece of asphalt. So everybody in the city is aware of that, the siting and for that communications tower up at Highland. And I think I even talked to Ron Lucas about it the other day. And he had discussion with the service safety director because we knew there'd be some question when the area had to be cleared. So that's just to facilitate a new communication system for the city of Athens.
Will we, so potentially there might be a site there for trees to be planted?
Oh, we've
they're taking trees.
required all other communications towers to have plantings around them. And in fact, that reminds me of the one on near the sewage works, the with the dying blue spruces.
Dead blue
Dead
spruces.
blue spruces, maybe, yeah. But that
The
is a
new
re-
ones?
Yeah.
The
Yes.
new, oh.
Yeah. So, I mean, the city council and the service safety director are aware of this installation. This is the first anybody's ever mentioned that tree replanting might be required. So hopefully then
Do you know
the
how many?
administration can get a copy of the minutes of this meeting, and after the site's finished, if you want to make some recommendation, I'm sure that'd be good.
Is there going to be clearing beyond where the slope goes down towards the park?
My understanding is there's going to be a strip area
Open
from the
area.
tower down to the reservoir that has to be kept clear for a guy wire.
Okay.
So there may be some additional cutting up the side of the face of that hill that's necessary, to provide a setback so it doesn't interfere with the structure or parts of the structure.
Pretty mature forest there.
There was only, from the line of sight that I had,
Mm-hmm.
there was only a couple, I think there were 2 trees that needed removed.
And
they
the
were
rest-
They were leaners.
Okay, the rest were just trimmings?
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
But there should be some trees planted around that, since we are requiring
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, both the zoning board of appeals and ourselves have said that these.
Yeah.
The city doesn't send itself to the zoning board,
Yes.
so.
No, but in terms of screenings, if we're going to require tree plantings around the privately
Yeah.
owned ones, I think we should be doing the same for.
Well, as I mentioned too, if you'd like to draft something and send it to the administration, I'm sure they'd be glad to look at it and consider it.
And you're talking
And
about
again-
around the facility itself.
Yeah, in the same way
'cause it's
that we
pretty
required.
visual up there to the
Yeah, it's a
neighbors,
part of
yeah.
the park, yeah,
Yeah.
it would be.
Who authorized that?
City council, presumably.
You mean the tower? It was in-
Sighting of the tower, yeah. Administration?
Presumably so.
And that was done by authorization of Athens City Council. It was a presentation that Ron Forrest, I think in particular, made regarding intercity communication.
Unbelievable.
Well, this is an opportunity to get some trees in place, and I think we can just ask for this to be consistent with what we require of private cell phone towers. And we do indeed have some leftover money in our own budget that we could contribute to the planting of the trees. So this could be an opportunity to use tree planting money for a site that really, as part of a park, ought to have
The
trees.
sighting is illegal under the landscape ordinance. It's besides the city park.
I'm sorry, this is a city council decision. I'm afraid we'll have to live with that. So,
Yeah, as a matter of fact, City Council is authorized to approve use of public lands. And so, I mean, it was discussed in open session of council.
Yeah.
We had 3
we
readings.
have
and-
no argument with that.
Yeah. We only have the authority to recommend the type and the kind of trees to be planted. It's
Yes.
the city safety director that's going to have to.
That's true. So we will make a recommendation, shall we, to
Yeah.
the
Yes.
Service Safety Director, and should we also make this generous offer of the remainder of our encumbered budget?
I think that's appropriate.
Yes.
Particularly since we have some money available.
Well, but when will it be done? I mean, don't you have to
Yeah,
spend the
they-
money by the end of the
Oh.
year?
Yeah, it wouldn't, yeah.
Yeah, will it be done by the
We
end
could
of the
use
year?
next year's money maybe, and offer to use.
I'm not really sure. They have boring rigs. They've had boring rigs in town for the last couple of days. As a matter of fact, they were doing soil borings behind my office when I left this evening for that tower. So construction is imminent. Will it be done by the end of the year? That I couldn't tell you for sure. I'm not involved in that project.
Okay. Well, we will communicate with the Service Safety Director about this. And thank you for elaborating. Thank you for the information. And thanks for the input. So, okay.
The only other
Is there any-
thing
Yeah.
that I have, I haven't gone downstairs to look through your files, to see if it was approved or not, but I don't know if you recall a while back, Michael Fletcher, who's the pastor at Central Avenue Methodist Church, had asked to could he remove a tree?
Oh,
It
that's.
was in the grass strip between the sidewalk and the curb on Central,
right.
north of
I think
Clark.
that's one that is on Ron's removal list in front of Central Avenue. Yes. I'm sorry, go ahead. You were saying?
Right, because Pastor was in the office this afternoon, said he hadn't heard anything back,
Yeah.
and was just asking me, what was going to be done.
I don't remember a permit on that one.
This was one that they had started pruning on themselves, was it? The corner of Central Avenue and...
It's a small tree. It's been badly pruned. It's in decline.
Well, it suffered crown death as a result of being girdled, partially girdled by mowers.
Oh,
Okay,
And-
that's what happens to a lot of these trees, because people don't know what the heck they're doing.
But
Central and... Is it Second?
Street.
It's,
No, when it
it's
comes
on
down.
the-
No, it's a
on the
block
northwest
from
corner
that.
Of Clark and Central,
Yeah,
Clark, right.
yeah, in the strip adjacent to Central Avenue.
Yeah.
It was a small tree that
Yeah.
we thought the city might be able to.
Yeah, and somebody had found the folks from the church, I think, trying to prune the dead limbs out. Yeah.
Sheltering Arms Hospital.
No, it's around the
next-
corner. Gotta go around the corner on Central.
On Central, yeah,
Yeah.
there's 2 of them. One of them's in serious need of help.
Yes.
That's the one.
Yes, and I think that was on a very early list
Yeah.
for removal by the city crew. And so that if that's not in your removals, it should be added. It probably fell off just from being so far in the past.
Around on the Clark Street side, they'd asked to remove a tree or relocate it. That was
Right,
up
that was a
against the
really bad
building.
idea.
But it was determined that that was on their property and not on the right-of-way. That tree was right up against the building,
Building,
pretty much.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, they wanted to transplant it and put it in place of the one that they had been pruning,
Right.
as I recall, which was not going to work for either tree. So, but if it were possible to get the dead tree in the tree lawn on the Central Avenue tree lawn out, and if you could get the roots out, we would have space to put another tree. I don't think there's any power lines overhead there.
There's some good planting sites there.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's pretty open.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
small
that
tree.
was the conclusion last time, that you could put a large shade tree in there.
Yeah.
So,
You
so
think
there's
you
one
could?
for, one for your possible.
Traffic and pull those roots out the back though.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, you could get it with a hoe pretty easy.
Yeah. So, okay, well, if you could get that out, then we could add yet another tree to the.
Yeah.
to the
And I'll
order.
communicate to Pastor that the city will be removing the tree and replanting another tree.
Yeah.
And recommend that they mulch it and
Keep the mowers away.
keep their mowers away, right.
And don't
Steve?
prune it.
Before you leave, Steve, could I ask you a question about the
Sure.
Hampton Inn's parking lot in the back
Yes.
that has no trees virtually?
Right, you brought that up the last meeting, and I'm looking at that,
Yeah,
the minutes, through the minutes. I've just not had a chance to get out
Okay,
there.
okay, I just wanted to know if they.
Oh, no, I've got,
Okay, good.
yeah, it's on the
Because
list of things
we're
to
coming
do.
up to the good planting season.
Yes.
Yeah. Even though Ron didn't take advantage of it, I will. We had this little event called Halloween last weekend that kind of consumed us. Took up quite a bit of time,
Yeah.
so
Bit of a focus.
things just had to be kind of put on hold. and
Sure.
They'll all come back up to the surface now.
Well,
When we say we're going to put it on the list, that's not a phrase for, we're going to forget about it. It is on the list.
Good.
very good. Does anybody else have any questions for Steve?
No, but I would like to go back to the Bennigans before
Ah.
we go on.
Yes.
I wonder if we need to give them some information emphasizing that they need to have shade trees and something about adequate planting of shade trees.
The letter that first went to them did indeed have a request, a recommendation that they plant 4 trees, as I recall, in spaces that were to have been cut out of the asphalt.
Right. As part of this record that I have right here, that if we don't have compliance, I will forward to the law director's office. There is the original letter from the Shade Tree Commission
Yeah.
that required 2 planting islands of, I think it was, as I recall, it was 724 square feet total and 2 planting islands, with 2 trees in each island. So that's
It's in there.
part of the record, too.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, but it appeared to me that the trees they were planted were calorie pears, which are not shade trees.
Yeah, and they were in planters that were,
Betula nigra, they're a cultivar of river birch.
These are the new ones.
No, no.
No,
this
no,
is
no.
something totally new.
What?
Different, it's a different part of the parking lot.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Something recently planted
In little
and
planter
something that
boxes.
looks like would be great for annuals.
Yeah. So it's just totally inappropriate what they've put in there in any event. Thank you very much for all the correspondence.
Yeah, just so you know, a lot of times, it's really much easier with everything that, Ron and I and other city department people have to deal with. When we're dealing with the public, voluntary cooperation is great. It really saves a lot of time and energy, and when you have to pursue these things, to the point of prosecution, it just, it's really not the way things ought to happen, but on occasion, it does go that direction. That's why this file's so thick right here.
Yeah.
I think Emily and I are concerned because we've seen the Hampton Inn, and then I noticed at the Holiday Inn, some attractive trees, but not shade trees, have gone in. And it just seems a shame to expend the money and not get the shade.
I wonder if we did kind of an informal, like, audit or inventory of some of the plantings that we've recommended and approved, and I think sometimes, what happens on the ground is not
Right.
what we've approved, in the meetings.
In effect, Emily and Lee found possible deficiencies at the Hampton Inn because they were looking for candidates for a landscape award. It was a survey, and they were looking for, they were going to give them an award, but they, yeah. So
I'll be honest with you, usually if I see a tree go in, I don't go in, I don't go down to see what it is, or to see if the tag's on it. On occasion I have.
Well, yeah.
But a lot of times they're not tagged, especially if they're 1.5 caliper, normally they're not tagged.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
And, you know, I can identify a few trees, but to know just exactly is that what was supposed to be there? Normally if there's a tree there, it doesn't.
Sure.
So I need your help, I do need your
Right.
help.
Emily and I can sort of tell from a block away practically, you know, what's.
Nice introduction to this, Lee.
Well, yes, indeed. Well, I think we're ready to move on to our next item. If you don't have anything else, Steve, I thank you for a lot of hard work on
Yeah,
that.
thanks.
Well, our next item is landscape ordinance revision is moving through channels, I guess we could say.
Terrific.
And we had a meeting with the law director, and we're doing a bit of revising, not much. And we will still be, we meet with the chamber coming up this week.
On
right?
Wednesday morning, we meet with the Chamber of Commerce to get their comments. They've already been made aware of, and they were in fact one of the organisations that came to us first with concerns about the current ordinance and the way it affects particularly smaller properties. And in regard to what you were just talking about in terms of what happens afterwards, it's just occurred to me that in fact this ordinance might actually be easier to check on the enforcement because basically you just add up the number of trees and divide it and look at the property, and that tells you whether they're in compliance or not. So it could actually be a lot simpler.
Yes, yes.
From that aspect, I hadn't thought of that, but the concerns that the law director brought up, I think can be dealt with quite simply. He thought there was a need for some definitions, and in fact, Anne, you might be able to help us find these. We want to define permeable or impermeable, or both, in the context of trees. I'm trying to think of the other definition. Oh yes,
View sheds.
View shed, which you thought you were going to be able to
Yeah,
find
I
a
think I
definition
did.
for.
Possibly.
And there was another one, topography, as well. Again, in the context. And what he's recommending is that we just insert a brief definition block into this proposed ordinance to define these in the context of the ordinance itself. The other issue he raised with us was whether, and he's not sure whether it has to go to the Planning Commission before it goes to Council.
Yeah.
And he's going to check on that.
I can't remember if we did that in the first place. I didn't remember it, but okay. So
I've never
not-
gone to the planning commission before.
And okay, and at the end, in the penalties, you'll be pleased to hear this, Steve. You're going to be named, or the zoning director or zoning inspector will be named as the person who has to issue the orders to comply. It doesn't say that explicitly, but it's implied. But he thought it
And
should
that's
be
what
there
you're doing,
explicitly.
yeah.
There are a lot of things in the code that specifically designate the service safety director,
Mhm.
but more recent ordinances that have that language say or designee,
Yeah.
so all you gotta do is look through your personnel file, and if you find that letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the moment, there are no major roadblocks. We'll just move it forward.
Okay.
I'd like to
Greg.
make a comment on the violation issue. It has to do with how the assignment of penalty is. It has to do, the way it's written now, you have to file for every day. I mean, actually you have to put paperwork in for every day there's a violation. I would like to see that the wording changed to be all-inclusive. In other words, the violation that takes place day after day after day, it adds up. It's not
Well,
a separate filing rate.
yeah.
That's how some of these people have been able to skate out from underneath complying with city ordinances and zoning.
That shouldn't happen in this case because it says clearly each day that a person continues to violate a provision of this code shall constitute a separate and complete offence.
That's where you have to change.
And
the
so you're
language.
saying
Separate, that has to go.
Okay, I don't know whether.
Not a separate, no, it needs
Well-
to be all-inclusive, that if the penalty is accumulative from the point of the initial violation.
Well, I think that's
That's
what's
what it means.
intended.
Well, it doesn't work that
But
way.
it's- but it's
because
not- you saying it's not working
Brownies,
that
you
way.
look at the
Okay.
brownie situation, and that's how they skated out of that,
Hmm.
and not a couple other situations as well. By the way, I didn't identify myself, so, but I appreciate the comment. I'm Greg Broadhurst, I live on the west side of Athens. But that part of the regulation needs to be made more specific in terms of, to make it enforceable. Because the way it's worded now, the prosecutor actually has to file for every day, one after the other. And they
Steve?
won't do it because of the cost.
Yeah, that's, at some point, that does become an issue, I suppose.
Yeah, you might want to, that'd be a question for the law director to review, because what that has to do with is procedures for filing in municipal court. The court has instructed that each day where you seek a penalty, you have to file each and every day. So for example, every week, you can't file and say 7 days have gone by. We want 7 days worth of penalty. Right now, the court makes the city file every day. If you want a penalty for every day, you have to file for every day. And that's a procedure that's kind of judicial in nature. And so anything that you might change,
Good point.
the regulation, you need to run that by Mr. Hunter.
The law director, if there's a way to better word it so that we
Yeah.
can avoid extra paperwork. I mean,
Right.
there's
And
no-
again, you may word it
Cost.
any way you like, but the court may not do it
Yeah,
that
well,
way.
I mean, that's why we asked the law director for his opinion on it, because hopefully he can give us the right one.
Yeah, well, thanks for raising the
Well, if
point.
that being the case, then, if that could work for the landscape ordinance, it could work for just about every other ordinance too. And boy, it would save me a lot of potential filing. For example, like the filing that may come up with a tenant landlord compliance form. I might have to file 400 pieces of paper every day if we go after every day. So.
Yeah,
It'll be great. If it'll work for that, it'll work for a lot of other things. So the law director's the man to talk to.
Yep.
yeah, that could be a deliverance.
Okay, we will do that.
Okay. Are there any other comments on the landscape ordinance revision? And we don't have any information on Emerald Ash Borer data at this point still, I think. So, just have to,
You never got a
Although
copy,
the-
did you? Because I haven't got a copy.
I never did. I
Okay.
did get the old inventory though, and it's in Albie's possession, right?
Yes, it is, it is.
So we do have the street tree, the 1992 street tree inventory, but no, I've not gotten anything.
Okay, so I'll try and follow up with my contact. Can you follow up with your
Yeah,
contact?
Yeah. I just, update, they did find emerald ash borer in, West Virginia, Fayette County, in New River Gorge. So,
Oh,
wow.
Jumped a long way.
That's far south, yeah.
yeah, and it was in a trap tree, even worse news. That means it's in there. and it-
Right.
Yeah, so it's, it's out of control.
Okay. Well, that's grim news.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We have, let's see, we can treat ourselves to other business first or to the minutes. So if people have read their email, they can speed right through this.
Let's
It's
look
pretty
by.
short.
I motion to approve them.
All right, there has been a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes as they are? Say something, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, the minutes are approved as they stand. And the next order of business is any other business. Does anybody have?
Something really short.
Ann has.
Mine will be really short.
Yeah, it's really short. You want me to go up there and talk or just sit here?
Let us,
It's-
but let's do Ann first because she's here. My logic is impeccable.
Okay, it's really short, Greg. Just wanted to let everybody know that on November 12th, we're going to be planting trees and to continue the Riverside tree planting on 682. So the OU Sustainable Living Organization has organized it. Susan Calhoun donated some trees, as well as some other people, and we're going to meet down there, and I think it's Veterans Day, so if you notice new trees or anything, that's,
682?
yeah, down there by the river where we've planted before.
This is White's Mill Drive, 682.
Yeah, where the really bad soil is. Mark's helped with the plantings there too. So I'm gonna work on Dave Brennan and see if I can get him to donate some compost, because I spotted some at his place today. So, on TV now.
Oh, if he's watching, he's
Yeah.
hungry.
They have lived. I mean, if you notice, most of the trees we planted have, they may be stunted, but they're alive.
They may be what, stunted?
We have a bunch of leaves composting painted. They've been down there for a while.
Yeah, but I was looking, Dave's is so close. I mean, I don't have
But
a
you
truck,
would-
so I have to like do it in buckets with
I
these
think there's
kids.
an offer of perhaps delivery. Is this a
Oh,
possibility?
really? Okay, we'll talk later.
Don't leave without her.
I'll have to help you chip, right, later?
Yeah. It's all done.
Oh, wow. No, I meant like to repay you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on the chipper.
All right, I'll email you or call you next week.
Okay, very good. And do you need more volunteers? What time do you need?
No, we have the volunteers. I just wanted you guys to be aware and
Super.
look for it.
What species are you planting?
Maples, oaks, and linden.
Good, very good.
Sounds good.
Yeah, silver linden. If there's a place for silver linden, it's there, right?
Yeah, that's great.
What kind of oak? What kind of oak?
I think the red oak.
Okay.
That sounds like a great project. Okay,
kind of
and I
maple?
think Greg Broadhurst has something too.
Greg Broadhurst, Granville Avenue. I just wanted to, in relation to the, actually, it's new business, old business. It has to do with the updating of the landscape ordinance and how that applies to private ownership as well. And what I would like to see is in the landscape ordinance, there would be specific references to, as far as speciation goes, to invasives and what trees are site-specifically acceptable, you know what I'm saying?
We do have a list of recommended tree species that Steve has given to people who are doing landscape work in parking lots. And it's available from the city for private individuals too.
But there's no reason why we couldn't also maintain a list of things
That are
thou-
nasty.
that thou shalt not. And,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, that's what I'm referring
Oh,
to.
yeah.
So
Okay, I'm
we
sorry.
have specific,
Confused.
we have specific guidelines in the landscape ordinance that actually, and that also makes it, if it was necessary, enforceable, because, you know, you get trees like golden rain trees, like, yeah, it's like invasive, you know?
I can, if I could speak to that,
Yeah.
what we recommend at ODNR is that you don't put that in the ordinance, because what happens is those change, you know, like just in the short time I've
Oh.
worked in the, you know, so what they recommend is, that you put it in your policy, you know, in policies and procedures, because we learn over time that, like at one time we thought calorie pear didn't bear fruit.
Or
Until they all cross
autumn
all
olive, when I
of-
was in the fourth year.
Yeah, so it's probably not a good thing to put in the code itself.
You mean specific species, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
but it's definitely something we should be addressing for
Yeah.
sure.
And the other is somehow connecting landscape ordinance with, I should know this section, but it escapes my mind, the section of the code that has to do with what is, you know, weeds and all that sort of thing, so arbitrary, you know what I mean? What constitutes a weed? It's like, you
Oh,
have,
that's in the zoning code,
That's in the
title
zoning.
23, I think, isn't it?
No, it's
Steve?
in, I can speak to it if you like.
Steve, if you could, I'd appreciate it.
The area that you're referring to, I believe, is in Title IX.
That's it, yes, title 9.
It talks about litter, noxious weeds, grass, and other vegetative material, other plants. I had to speak a week ago Monday to council regarding noxious weeds because we had noted some people had front yard gardens, and we'd asked them to clean them up as soon as it frosted. But we had gone through a whole neighborhood, and actually, I found out from going to the OSU Extension Service website that there are 14 noxious weeds in the state of Ohio. And just as Ann said, they change. Changes all the time. So I didn't realize that those little black-eyed daisies that grow along the side of the road are a noxious weed.
Black-eyed Susan?
Yeah.
Something else.
And Queen Anne's lace is a noxious weed. Bullseye.
Daisy.
Cole's foot,
Maybe that's what he's thinking.
Cole's foot.
Don't
An
give
early
Black Eyed
s-
Susan's a bad name. You know?
Cole's
Well,
foot
they're those
is
little,
native.
it's called bullseye, black eye. God, I can't remember exactly right now, I'm sorry. But,
It's a daisy-like flower.
yeah, very small. There's a million of them on the bank when you go up to Movies 10. They've just covered the whole hillside right there. So I never thought much about it. I've got a lot of them in my backyard. Found out grapevine was a noxious weed, if it's
We
unattended.
agree.
Queen Anne's lace is a noxious weed.
Steve,
And many thistles are noxious weeds.
could I say something about those lists? Some of them were made as lists that were problems for agricultural lands.
Oh,
And I don't know how accurately those should be applied to residential areas. I mean, if we have some Queen Anne's lace at the edge of our yard, in town, is it going to hurt some farmer's field 5 miles out of town?
Yeah, there's a
So-
difference between noxious weeds and invasive species like the
Well, exactly.
mustard.
Yeah, that was part of my testimony before council the other night was, they wanted to know what my office determined was a noxious weed. And we said, well, normally we don't go for that. We look at the rest of the code that talks about vegetable litter and other vegetation. And there is no definition for noxious weed in that section of the code.
In public health and safety, that'd be something to, something like spotted hemlock that causes contact dermatitis or
Poison
something like
ivy.
that, or, yeah, but.
Poison ivy.
Yeah.
Poison ivy is a ground cover on your.
Yeah, if it was out of control. growing.
If I remember the section, it's also got it has in it immediately afterwards something about hazardous, and so
Has to
you
be
would-
injurious and harmful to the inhabitants of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I had
spotted
stressed,
hemlock would do that.
I had mentioned to council that at a discussion we'd had at one of these meetings specifically related to bamboo, where you told me it wasn't a grass and it shouldn't be considered a grass to have to be cut to 8 inches or lower. I mentioned that had come out of the discussion at the tree commission. So that section of the code, I think, probably does need to be reworked because my officers, they can locate trees, but they don't necessarily know how to identify the species. Same with what are noxious weeds. They're asking me, just tell me what a noxious weed is, and I'll take care of it. But it arose out of a letter that was read in open session of City Council, essentially questioning, the interpretive ability of my officers to identify what was a grass, what was a noxious weed, what was other vegetation. And I need all the help I can get with
I
it.
think council should budget for
A botanist on
City
staff.
botanist.
botanist as a
Urban
consultant to
That's
to
cheaper
your
for
workers.
I think we could probably define some of those.
We need more jobs for botanists. I think
I would think, across the nation, weed ordinances are under scrutiny everywhere.
Oh, okay.
I think that with more and more people interested in reestablishing native ecosystems and natural landscapes, I mean, sometimes, let's face it, they look a little weedy. And so I would just encourage as much flexibility as possible until they are really informed about what plants are good and bad, because some of the most beneficial plants ecologically aren't the most attractive, and so, and there's a lot of great gardeners here. I'm
And I
I
think
see them have to-
I think it still goes to that thing about hazardous or injurious.
Yeah, noxious
Right.
by definition
right.
would
There's
apply
only 2 or
harmful.
3 of those.
Right, and so in a rural context, it may have a different set than you would have in a
Urban setting.
goats eat poison ivy, for example.
We could give you 3 truly nasty things, spotted hemlock being one of them. But
Cow parsnip,
cow parsnip,
and probably the big, what's the big pigweed? That's the other, those are the really, and aside from poison ivy, those are really the only plants that I can think of that cause any kind of injurious results.
Could we define, list some of these things on our website? Is that a helpful
Yeah, that'd be an
way to do it,
educational-
including?
I just thought of the, what. the-
Ron has just got an idea here.
I have a definition from Ohio Department of Agriculture that has a list of all the noxious weeds, what they are, and what they can do. And I can get that information to Steve. It's part of my commercial applicator's license. So I have that summary of all those things. So that could be some information that we could put.
It'll be interesting for all of us to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, ones that you mentioned are on there, but there's also some others, some mustards and Johnson grass.
Yeah, Johnson grass is also on the list, which is used quite extensively to immediately revegetate like roadways, highway work. Johnson grass is the preferred.
And I think the,
Hard to believe.
No, in Athens there are.
Oh my gosh.
I think the injurious part is to other plants, is what it's referring to.
To other
That's what-
plants?
Yeah.
So-
It overtakes the existing vegetation that was there and replaces it with
It's
its own.
invasive.
Invasive, yeah.
A lot of these weeds.
This is something that, at the point where we finally get a website,
Yeah.
the educational possibilities of putting up stuff like this would be worthwhile. Of course, people can go find those things now.
But I could summarize all the information and get it to you.
But I think what would be considered noxious weeds, this could be something that could consume a lot of time by experts because
Judge Grimm could have a lot of fun with this one.
Well-
that's just my suspicion.
I had mentioned to council, for example, pokeweed, it's kind of little for a while, and then all of a sudden it's huge. There's a big clumps of berries on it, very poisonous.
It's very important food source for many migrant songbirds, though. I mean, it takes, I've never heard of anybody dying from it. I mean, people actually eat it when it's.
You have to eat the tender leaves, small leaves, early on in the growth or below about a foot. Yeah, it's a kind of a native type food, but you can get sick from eating it too. So, for example, I just wanted to know, if pokeweed is good on.
Actually, Steve, with the number of plants that you can eat
Yeah.
is greatly outnumbers the edible plants. In fact, I don't want to launch into my economic plant lecture, but so that just because something will make you sick does not mean that it is noxious, because that's kind of the native condition of the majority of plants. That's their defense about being browsed and, because they can't move away. They have chemical defenses. So it's just when a small amount does a lot of damage, then, I mean, look at all the rhododendrons and azaleas and.
It's true, those things are all poisonous. Well,
Yeah.
we have a danger here of botanists
Right,
going
sure,
berserk.
sorry.
Having way too much fun.
Just as I had mentioned with the bamboo a couple meetings ago, if you could help and maybe even forward some information to city council to help, because what I promised them that I'll do is to go out and research ordinances related to front yard gardening, and there are quite a few, because as I think, Ann, as you'd mentioned, there's just a trend toward that kind of a thing. A lot of people here have shaded backyards. They can't have a garden in the backyard, so they do want to come out in the front. So I'm going to find some examples of ordinances and give those to city council so that they may be included in the landscape ordinance or the zoning code or whatever. As you mentioned too, the trend is not to over-regulate. For example, the city of Sacramento, California used to have a regulation that said front yard gardens were permissible, but only 30% of the front yard and no plant over 4 feet in height. And just in the past couple months, they've stricken that section from their code.
Yeah,
I
So,
think flexibility is the key.
yeah.
It's part of what makes Athens so beautiful to just the average. I mean, when I walk the streets, it's really what makes it so much fun to watch. That's why I walk here. It's beautiful.
So,
That is true.
and from my office, a lot of times though, the way myself and my officers are getting involved is because someone is complaining. They're not saying how beautiful the neighbor's front yard garden is, they're saying, well, isn't there something you can do about that?
That's true. That guy's.
And that's kind of how I got to council the other night.
Complaint driven.
Yeah, because we were acting on complaints.
All right.
And,
Well, we
as
will
long as I
get-
know for sure what to do, that's what I'll do, and I'll do it all over town.
We will, if there's somebody here who is in particular interested in giving information to Steve about noxious weeds, or is there,
It came up in Mr. Wiles' environmental committee meeting, so you could forward it straight to him
okay, well, we will
At least-
communicate then with,
for the next couple months.
yeah, very good. I think.
I
Is
just
there-
I just wanted to add really quickly, we also want to really take a look at, which is a couple of programs have been around for quite a long time. National Wildlife Federation has Backyards for Wildlife, they have a certification program. There's another program, I believe, it's also through National Wildlife Federation, it's called Backyards for Butterflies.
That's actually how a lot of towns are doing it
Yeah,
too.
they're
If
looking
you're
at- they're looking
certified.
at these programs
Yeah.
that have actually been successful,
Yeah.
and they're adapting the certification models into their ordinances. Also, when we were at the Southeastern Ohio Tree Conference a few weeks ago, a number of us were there was a presentation by, what's her name, Pam or Penny from Meigs County about rain gardens.
Right.
And we do
Yes.
have issues here because we don't have a stormwater utility, but rain gardens are an excellent way to dissipate and actually reduce stormwater dissipation costs in the city. And that's something else that we probably ought to take a look at as incorporating into our, what constitutes a weed garden.
Okay, well, we could talk about this all night, and the undergraduates who are on the cameras would fall asleep, and they have to go home and do their homework. So I think we should perhaps adjourn. If anybody has any other business at this point? No? Okay, call the meeting to end.